So we're here talking about Martin Luther and the early stages of the Protestant Reformation. And the original Protestant religion was Lutheranism, and as Luther's ideas became more well known throughout Europe, he got a lot of religious philosophers thinking about the big questions of religion, and some of these thinkers didn't agree with either Luther or the Catholics. So we see the emergence of other Protestant religions in Europe, and none of these Protestant religions recognized the Pope as their leader. So you're not expected to know all the different Protestant denominations, but I will give you some examples. So the second Protestant religion I want to talk about is Calvinism, and this was developed by John Calvin. Now, John Calvin was born in France in 1509, and he was heavily influenced by Martin Luther's ideas. Like Luther, he was kicked out of the Catholic Church, he was kicked out of France, and he ended up going into exile in Switzerland. And here, during his time in Switzerland, he established a new church, the Calvinist Church. One of the central tenets of Calvinism is that human beings are predestined for heaven or hell. So this idea of predestination is important. It's the idea that God has already decided who is worth saving even before they were born. Another major Protestant religion developed in England, and in England the break from the Catholic Church was over the issue of divorce. The King of England at the time, Henry VIII, was trying to get a divorce from his wife, Catherine of Aragon. So before the divorce, Henry VIII was trying to have a son with his wife, and it was very important for him to have a son because this would give him an heir to his throne. The problem was that they couldn't conceive. So in 1527, Henry VIII went to the Pope and asked him to grant him a divorce from Catherine of Aragon so he could marry his mistress. And the Pope refused his request, so Henry, seeing these other Protestant churches breaking away, he decided he was going to break away from the Catholic Church, and he formed the Church of England with the monarch, or the king, as the head of church, and granted himself a divorce. So Henry VIII would go on to have 7 different wives. So the Catholic Church was really scared about the emergence of these new Protestant religions because they challenged the authority of the Pope, they challenged the authority of Rome. So they took a number of measures to counteract the developments of the Reformation, and collectively these measures taken by the Catholic Church are known as the Counter-Reformation. And the first of these measures was missionary work. If areas in Western Europe were going to fall to other versions of Christianity, the Catholic Church wanted to increase their efforts to convert people in non-Christian lands. So the church established a new religious order known as the Jesuits, or the Society of Jesus, and this was a group of priests whose main purpose was to spread the Catholic faith. So Jesuits traveled abroad, they established schools that were under the control of Catholic nations. They served as advisors to Catholic kings, and they developed a list of books that were to be banned by the Catholic Church. So what's significant here is that the development of Protestant religions in Western Europe convinced the Catholic Church more than ever that it's important to go out and convert people in distant lands to Catholicism. The other key phase in the Counter-Reformation is known as the Council of Trent, and this took place between 1545 and 1563. Trent is a place in Italy, and the Council of Trent was really an extended meeting that brought together the most important Catholic thinkers from around Europe. And these thinkers met for an extended period of time to develop a new Catholic doctrine that would address some of the concerns brought up by the Protestant Reformation. At the end of the Council of Trent, the Catholic Church reaffirmed their doctrine. At the end of the Council of Trent, it was decided that the sale of indulgences was to be forbidden, so that was sort of the thing that started the whole Protestant Reformation. It was also decided that salvation was achieved through both faith and through good deeds, so this is at odds with the teachings of the Protestant Church, who believed you could reach salvation through faith alone. Religious authority is found in both the Bible and the Church, so the Church does have authority, and people are not capable of interpreting the message of the Bible without the help of the church. So people aren't encouraged to try to interpret the Bible for themselves. They should listen to what the church tells them is in the Bible. It's also important to understand that the conflicts between Catholics and Protestants were often marked by violence and led to some very devastating wars in Western Europe. The first major war between Catholics and Protestants was fought in France, and this is known as the French Wars of Religion. In France, a new group of Protestants known as the Huguenots fought against the Catholics for control of the monarchy following the death of King Henry II. And the conflict ended with the signing of the Edict of Nantes, and this determined that Catholicism would be the official religion of France, but that Protestant religions would be tolerated. But the French Wars of Religion were really small in scale compared to the 30 Years' War. And the 30 Years' War was fought in what is now Germany, but most of the European powers were involved in the conflict at one point or another. So the war started as a religious conflict, but it got more complicated as more and more countries got involved. When the war started, Germany was controlled by the Holy Roman Empire, and individual princes in Germany were seeking more independence from the empire, and one of the ways they thought they could get more independence was by breaking from the Catholic Church. So the 30 Years' War ended in 1648 with the signing of the Peace of Westphalia, and one of the results of this treaty was that German princes were allowed to choose the subject's form of religion, so they could choose what religion their people would follow. But this was an extremely devastating war. Germany lost about 1/3 of their population. But just looking at these two wars, the French Wars of Religion and the 30 Years' War, we know today France is predominantly a Catholic country, Germany is predominantly a Protestant country. So what were the impacts of the Reformation? Some of them we've talked about already. Things like the formation of new religions, the increase of missionary activity abroad, Catholics clarifying their doctrine and making efforts to reduce corruption within the church. But the Reformation also had some less obvious impacts. So the Reformation did create more skepticism and criticism of religion and authority in Europe. It really brought a challenge to some of these long-held beliefs in Europe, such as the divine right of kings. It definitely brought the church down a notch in the eyes of the public. Also, Protestant religions tended to place more value on individualism than Catholics. Bibles were translated into people's native languages. People were encouraged to read the Bible and interpret it for themselves. So it helped create more of a climate of individualism in Western Europe. And we'll see these themes of skepticism and individualism tying closely with the second part of our podcast, which will look at the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment in Europe.